What's up, nerds? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a rig that I feel a lot of anglers avoid, maybe even are a little bit afraid of, at least intimidated to use, and that is the Alabama rig. It just so happens that your boys, me and Paul, got a chance to go down and fish Guntersville Lake in Alabama, and during that time, we threw the Alabama rig probably 400 or 500 times. Lots and lots of casts on this thing. So now we've got a little bit of time on the water with it, and we wanted to take sort of a beginner's approach to this for anybody out there who's been intimidated by throwing these rigs. If you've seen the umbrella rig, the Alabama rig, and you've been like, no way. There's like 1 to 5 hooks on this thing, and there's a lot of money invested into each of those casts. I don't really want to mess around with this. This video is for you, because I'm telling you right now, it straight up catches fish. It was definitely a rig that I was intimidated about, and I've been avoiding for a long, long time. I've known people in Michigan throwing this rig forever, and they catch fish on it all the time. And for whatever reason, I just had absolutely zero faith in it. And now I have faith. Now I understand. Now I start to see the light, and I want you guys to as well. So I want to go through a couple different brands of Alabama rigs that we've been using that we've liked, and talk about the cost a little bit there as well. And then throw you guys some tips, talk about the setup, all of that. And then again, this is from a beginner level. You should be able to go grab one of these rigs, rig it up, go out to the water, and hopefully catch some fish. So let's get right into it. Oh, and by the way, if you like content like this, be sure to subscribe. Maybe smash that like. Thanks. So I'm gonna share with you guys first, storage. Storage is important. I've seen all sorts of crazy stuff. When we were down in Alabama, one of the guys on Paul's team for this Knuklehed Bass Series Championship that we were fishing on Guntersville actually had his stored in a tennis ball tube. So, I mean, that's an option as well. Some of these come in tubes like this. So this is from Shane's Baits. This is one of the rigs here, actually this one right there, the little mini rig, Blades of Glory, that I have. So they could come in a tube. You can just always put it back in this. Once you rig them up, they take up a lot of space, right? So you need to find a solution. One that's pretty cheap that I actually liked, I used it down in Guntersville, is this 3700 size box from Plano that has these very specific dividers in here that hold all of the wires. So that's pretty awesome. Keeps them contained, allows me to leave it rigged. And the nice thing about that is when we were on Guntersville Lake, I was able to just swap out Alabama rigs using a snap clip on my main line and just make easy swaps, right? So that was nice. Depending on the conditions, sometimes, you know, I was getting bit on the Yum Flash Mob, and sometimes I was getting bit on the Picasso, so I was swapping it out. One had blades, one didn't. Those were the two that caught the most fish though. So something like this is really valuable in terms of storing this crazy amalgamation of hooks, wires, and blades. Another option, I got this on Amazon. It came with just about everything that you could need. It's definitely lower quality terminal tackle all across the board. It's just not as good as some of the other options out there. That's just something to keep in mind. You just gotta know what you're getting into. So let's start with specifically what an Alabama rig or an umbrella rig is. An Alabama rig is going to be a front end jig head. Sometimes it's gonna look like a fish. Sometimes it's just gonna look like a bullet weight. Sometimes it's just shrink wrap. So it comes in many different variations. The beginner level, you're just gonna grab a jig head like this. That jig head is gonna come in a couple different weights. For me, I tend to like to go lighter, right? That would be the recommendation, because you're gonna put a bunch of jig heads on this thing as well. So you're gonna add a ton of weight. These things are gonna weigh rigged up anywhere from 1 to 3+ ounces. So they're gonna be a bit bigger, right? It's going to look like this, where you've got your jig head, you've got a collection of wires, depends on the option. I've seen them where they've got, you know, dummy rigs up here where there's no hook and you just thread on a paddle tail or a swim bait. And I've seen them where they have just blades around the top and then one center wire down the middle. What I'm using right here is what is legal and allowed in the state of Michigan and consequently the state of Alabama, which is a 5-hook setup, a 5-wire Alabama rig. It means that I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hooks on here, meaning 5 times the opportunity to catch fish, right? There are 3-wire and single-wire options as well. So if you just look into your state fishing laws, what you can do is you can find out how many hooks you can have on a single lure or a single rig at a time in the water. So some states are gonna have like a single hook law, some have 3, some have 5. So what we encourage you to do is go look up the laws first so please don't get in trouble, and just find the right option for you. How many hooks can you have, and then go get that, right? So I'm running the 5-hook. Depending on the state that we go fish, I'm gonna have to change this up. Just make sure that I'm fishing legally rather than illegally, all right? So that's the Alabama rig. Just on a snapshot, poof, that's what it is. You throw some paddle tails off the back here. You're gonna have to put on your own jig heads. Generally, what you're gonna get is you're gonna have the wires with a little swivel and then a snap right there, right? So you're just gonna take your jig head, whatever you choose to use, and you're gonna put it on that snap, and then you're gonna rig up your choice of paddle tails. As far as the rig that you're going to run this on, what you're gonna wanna do is go with a heavier stick. I used my Swimbaits stick the entire time we were down there. That is an 8-foot rod. It's actually the Akuma Guide Select specifically. It's a heavy power and it's a moderate action. The nice thing about that is that it had the backbone to set the hook on these fish and make sure that I kept them pinned and I wasn't losing them. So most of these jig heads that I'm using, they're 3/0. Sometimes you use bigger ones, sometimes you use belly weighted so you can go weedless. Sometimes you're just using EWGs and going weightless with them. Those are options as well. But the point is that you have some basic jig head on there and you wanna have that hook penetrating power. So you got that heavier stick, which will also be capable of managing the 1 to 3+ ounce load that you're casting with this monster. And we're gonna sweep that hook set into that fish's mouth and we're gonna just bring it back in. Think of it as like a really, really big spinnerbait, because that's essentially what it is. As far as your reel, you're gonna have plenty of options out there. What I would go with is something that has heavier fighting capability. So we need something with a good drag. What I was using is the Akuma Komodo SS. I have a 300 size on my Swimbait setup, so I use that most of the time, but sometimes I swap it out for the 200 size. 200 size is about 25-pound drag, which is huge. And then the 300 size, the power handle or not, is around 30 pounds of drag. The point is, it's got the drag capability to fight that fish through whatever cover you're dealing with and get it back to you, whether you're on the bank, boat, or the kayak. As far as line, what I was specifically using was 50-pound test braid. You can use 50 or even 65. If you're fishing heavier cover, I would obviously opt for like the 65-pound braid. And I did have, because of the Swimbait setup, I had monofilament on there. So what I would recommend is actually fluorocarbon. So you go your braid to your fluorocarbon leader, which would be around a 20-pound fluorocarbon. 50-pound test braid, 20-pound test fluorocarbon leader, you're gonna be good to go. Now, attaching the A-rig to the line is an interesting situation. Some of the A-rigs you find will have a swivel built in, right? So this is a Picasso lures. Picasso makes fantastic lures all around. Their A-rigs, they have a plethora of, there's a lot of them, a lot of options in there, are fantastic. This A-rig down in Alabama probably caught about 30 fish for me. It's fantastic. I'm a huge fan of it, and I think I only had to, I probably swapped out 2 or 3 swim baits on this thing just as they got beat up and they lost their tails because they're Kitex, and that's kind of what happens. We'll get to those in a little bit. So having that swivel on top is nice because sometimes with a fixed position jig head, the A-rig is gonna actually roll on you. It's gonna spin, and that's gonna give you an inverse of the action you actually want it to have. So that could cause you to miss bites. So you want to make sure that you have a swivel up there. If you don't, another option when you don't have a swivel at the head, like this is a Yum Flash Mob, so it's fixed position for your tie-in point, you can add a split ring and a swivel to the top, and that pretty much solves the problem. So now you got your swivel, so you're not going to have this thing roll on you as it potentially would. Another option that I found when I was doing some research on all of this is you can also just vary out the weights of the jig heads on the A-rig. So we could take this Picasso A-rig, for example, and you'll see that I have my lower 2 hooks, my top 2 hooks, and my center hook. On these lower 2 hooks, I could go heavier, and on these top 2 hooks, I could go lighter or even weightless. So this could be like 1/8 ounce up here. These could be like a 1/4 ounce down here, and that would help prevent this thing from rolling as well. So lots of different ways to deal with that. Personally, I like just looking for a jig head with a swivel. That seems to be really helpful. Now the thing is, with Alabama rigs, this is potentially how they look when you get them. Pretty straight, right? So the next thing you would have to do is you have to fold these wires out. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna find your center wire, which if you have a bladed A-rig, it generally doesn't have blades. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Again, we're just looking at a beginner level approach here. And then you're gonna take all your other wires and you're gonna fold them away from that, right? So we're gonna, near the jig head, just push it up, bend it away. I know it feels crazy to do that because you're like, I just paid 20 bucks for this or whatever. Why am I folding it? That's just the way these babies work. So once I get an idea of where I want this to bend, there we go. Start positioning my wires. Now this is a cheap one from Amazon, so I'm not too worried about it, but we want it to be functional. There we go. Basically, we're just gonna spread those wires out like so. That's gonna keep our jig heads away from each other so they don't wrap into each other, they don't get hooked up. And it's also gonna have better drawing capability because it looks like a more spread out school of fish. Each one of these blades, if you get a bladed A-rig, is gonna put off that flash, that vibration, and especially in colder water, can do a really good job of one, slowing down the rig. So once I get a fish that keys in on this, they have more time to decide to strike. And two, drawing those fish out just from that noise, flash, vibration, etc. So colder water or fishing deeper or both, blades are a great option. When you got finicky fish or you're fishing, not so deep or not so cold, going with an option like this from Picasso, which is blade free, also a great option. So going back to setting up your rig, once we've got this thing spread out, and again, this is a fixed position jig head, so I'm gonna have to add a split ring and a swivel to that so I can keep it from rotating on me. Then you're gonna be looking for rigging out your jigs as well as your paddle tails. So I look down here, I've got this center wire. This is going to be my target, right? So the thing I had to get my head around and really understand is that I don't want to just take my A-rig and necessarily just throw all the same color on it. Something that you can do that seemed to have a really good impact when I was in Alabama, and something that I'm going to be using in the future, is by having this target plastic back here. So all of these, I'll throw my jig heads on here, I'm going to rig them up with paddle tails. These four, generally, I'm going to keep them the same color. And you can see that on these two rigs. So here's one right here. Okay, so I have this like Tennessee shad color. So these are the Kitech Easy Shiners. Most of them are in a 3-inch, and then my trailer is actually a 4-inch. So these right here are the Tennessee shad 3-inch, and then this is this sight flash color right there, that like white and flashy silver in a 4-inch, okay? And the point of that, again, is I'm separating the masses, right? So this fish right here looks like it's kind of trailing these other four. And it also just makes an easier target. If I got all 5 of the same color, you're still potentially gonna get bit, don't get me wrong. It just seems that this works a bit better, right? In my opinion, and from what I've seen in research. Then you look at something like this, which I did get bit on. It was actually my biggest fish of the trip. Is I've got all sight flash, right? But this back one is a Kitech 5-incher, and it's just a little bit bigger, like really draws them out. So we got the 3-inch plastics up here, a little thicker, more natural looking with that flat top. So they're gonna swim a little bit different with a thumping tail. And then I've got this Kitech with this really high action ribbed body. That's also in a 5-inch. And fishing that in like 17 feet of water, that got me the first fish and the biggest fish of the trip that I had. So that was nice. And then one more, which reminds me, I gotta call this out. These do come in different lengths of wire. So one more I wanna show you guys. This is the Swimbaits Mini Blades of Glory, which is really cool. I got yelled at for not making a Will Ferrell reference to this. Yes, he did make an ice skating movie called Blades of Glory. I'll be honest, it's one of the Will Ferrell movies. I didn't really watch that much, but no hate to anybody who loves it, my bad. This is the one that has like that bullet head style instead of the jig head that looks like a fish. On this one, we went with a brand called 4x4, which makes these awesome high quality ball head jigs. And we threw on the green pumpkin and white paddle tails. And then off the back, we had that 4-inch Easy Shiner as well. So just another variation that we can go with. We got blades on this one. Cool thing about Swimbaits that I learned is you can actually unscrew this top piece and you can replace each of these individual wires, which is awesome. So big fan of this setup. I like that one as well. And you can see, obviously we got big difference in the length of the wires just between these two. This is the Yum and the Swimbaits. And then a huge difference between these two and the Amazon one that I have, which is like a full maybe 6 or even 6.5-inch wires on that one. It does say that this is for stripers though. So there's that going for me. Last thing I want to throw out is in doing our research, it seemed that having the right paddle tail was crucial, right? Man, these are chewed up. These got beat to all heck. Kitech's, not durable, great action though. But what got called out 9 times out of 10 was the Kitech Easy Shiners, right? Just seems like a great option for this type of rig. In general, I feel and have heard that Kitech just is a great plastic for colder water conditions. It tends to maintain its action really, really well in cold water. Other than that, I'm not sure exactly why it gets called out all the time, but I'm a believer because I caught a ton of fish on this setup. So there you go. take that for what it's worth. As a bonus, I did mention this, there's lots of different types of jig heads that you guys can grab. There's these super basic swim bait jig heads. You've got, in this case, the owner inshores were fantastic and come in a bunch of different weights. These are in 116. So this was like a light rig that I was running. And then there's those 4x4 ball head jigs, also a great option that you can go with. One that I didn't fish while I was in Alabama, but did have kind of ready to go was this one, which had another type of jig that you could use. These are from Z-Man. These are the finesse eyes. So those are pretty awesome as well. So to wrap this video up, let's talk about how to actually catch fish on this, because I had cast an Alabama rig a decent number of times in Michigan before heading down south. Now, what I didn't realize was I was casting it potentially at the wrong time of year and definitely in the wrong places. So I've thrown it super shallow and I've thrown it in the summer. Not that it can't catch and not that that won't work. It just, I wasn't putting myself in a good position to have an opportunity to catch. And I want you guys to have the best possible opportunity. So here's the way to think about this thing that I wasn't processing at the time. This is a lure you want to count down. You want to get it to a depth and you want to consider fishing it deeper, off of drop-offs, off of structure. That is where you're going to have the best success. And that was the case when we were in Alabama. We ended up fishing this thing the majority of the time in around 8 to 12 feet of water, and sometimes in as deep as 17 feet of water. So what we were finding, now you don't have to have forward-facing sonar to figure this out. You can just do a countdown on the fall, right? If I have close to a 1 ounce bait and kind of count in my head, it's gonna pendulum down towards you, towards boat, kayak, bank, wherever you're at, right? And I can feel for it to get close to the bottom. When I start to make contact, when I start ticking weeds, I'm gonna be retrieving this thing really slow and just feeling for that with the sensitivity of the rod and the line. So if we're using braided line, we got that sensitivity. If you've got a good quality stick that you're using, you got the sensitivity, you're gonna feel for that. The other option is if you have forward-facing sonar, this giant thing is really easy to pick it up on sonar. So I can find it, I can see it, and I can retrieve it at exactly the depth that I want it at. But without that, all I'm saying is just find a count in your head that works, whether it's a foot a second, or if you get a little heavier, maybe it's a little faster than that, 2 feet a second or something like that. So what I'm doing is I'm letting this thing drop and I wanna be running it through those bait schools. I wanna be looking for those suspending bass and I wanna run that by them. And if we're around cover, I wanna get as close to cover as possible without getting hung up. That's the key. So we wait for it to fall. It's gonna pendulum down. Sometimes you get bit just on the fall. So give it time with that. And then we're gonna do a nice slow retrieve, right? Because what happens is, what I didn't realize, these excel in cold water. Like right now, depending on where you are in the country, as long as there isn't ice on the surface and you can actually cast this thing out there, you can be catching fish on this. And you can catch them all the way through pre-spawn. And you can catch them all year round. It just seems that they catch a lot more in that cold weather, which is why I think that Paul and I did really well with this when we were down in Alabama, right? Our water temps were right around 60, sometimes just below 60, 57, 58 degrees. So I'm looking forward to putting this to the test again in Michigan. I'm going to catch a fish on this in Michigan. It's gonna happen. I'm putting it out there right now to make it happen. And I want you guys to go catch on this too. So colder water temps, we're looking for fall through spring, right? So end of summer, all the way through spring. I want you guys trying to cast this thing, get out there, get after it. Also, I mentioned this too, there's the option of no blades versus blades. Mostly what I saw is like if you're getting reaction bites, like you can go for those blades. Spinner baits are working, for example. Go for those blades. Also consider blades, which come in different sizes, by the way. So depending on the size, they're gonna help you slow the rig down a little bit and could be better for fishing in deeper water. So something to consider. If you were to get just one rig, I might actually consider this one right here. This is the Yum Umbrella. You can get this from Yum, the brand, right? So you can find this on any online tackle store you want. I'll put a link to this and actually some of these other ones in the description below. This rig in particular comes with everything that you need, including all the paddle tails. So you get one color of the paddle tails. So you're gonna use like 4 of them and then you'll throw your own as that trailer one. But for 20 bucks, $19.99, you've got this whole setup, blades, jigs, paddle tails, all of that together. You don't get this swivel at the top. You have to add that yourself. But for 20 bucks, you're pretty much set to go. And I think that also sort of encompasses the problem that most people have with the A-rig, like swim baits, like glide baits, If I start casting something out there that costs more than $5 to $10, it can be really nerve-wracking. It can be really intimidating, and it can be something that causes you to avoid using this. And I'm here to tell you, it's worth the risk. Like, it's worth using this. Give it a shot. And if you're really, really concerned or you have a lot of cover, consider just going weedless on all those paddle tails. Instead of going with an open hook jig head like that, you can just use an EWG or a belly-weighted swim bait hook. Something with a screw lock, right? So then you can rig those things weedless and you can bump over all the cover you want. You're not gonna get hung up. Weedless, not weed proof, but mostly you're not gonna get hung up. Otherwise, price-wise, what you're looking at is around 20 bucks for most of the Picasso lures, 20, 25. And then you're gonna have to buy your hooks. Those hooks are gonna run anywhere from 5 to 10 bucks a pack. The inshores were around $5.99 for 3 or 4 of them. So you had to buy 2 packs. So were the 4x4s. So it's not cheap, I get it. And the Shane's Blades of Glory, mini Blades of Glory here, this was $16.99, I believe. It's on a recent unboxing that we did. Then you look at your storage options, like my buddy using the tennis ball tube. That's free. That's just taking trash and repurposing it. That's recycling. Or you get this Plano box that I have, which was, again, around 15, 16 bucks. So a little bit of an investment up front, and at the same time, we gotta be looking at this as potentially opening up a whole new world of opportunity in terms of fish catching capabilities. So I'd consider doing it. I think it's totally worth it. I'd love to see you guys get out there, get after it, go hammer them on some Alabama or umbrella rigs. So here's the Cliff's Notes, stuff you need to remember. You need a heavy stick, you need it longer, 7/6 plus at least. You need a high drag reel, something that can handle a heavier rig as well as getting through heavy cover. So something in the 20+ pound drag range would be great. You're gonna want braid or braid to fluoro or full-on fluoro. So it's gotta be like 50 pound to 65 pound test braid to 20 pound fluoro or full-on 20 pound fluoro. You can get away with that. Pick out your favorite brand, whatever you wanna go with. We recommend Picasso, we like the Shane's baits, and we also really like the Yum. So if you really wanna save some money, the Yumbrella is a fantastic option. You can get the all-in rig, 20 bucks, you're good. And they also come in a whole bunch of different variations, blades, no blades, giant blades, so really cool. It's the economic choice for me. I think you guys should pick that up if you pick up any. These Amazon ones were fine. You're just not gonna have as high quality of parts on this. So we could be breaking off blades, rusting blades. It'll function though, it'll function. And I'll probably put these to the test a little bit more next year as well. If you're not sure on all these other decisions, just go with the basics. The Yumbrella rig with the 5 to 6 inch wires. Go with the appropriate amount of hooks for the laws in your state. Whether you're a 1 hook, 3 hook, or a 5 hook kind of state, make sure you're following those laws. Please don't get in trouble. And like everything else that we talk about on our channel, the Aggressively Average Anglers, we encourage you to be aggressively average at something. Just get out and try some new stuff that you haven't tried before. It's really rewarding when you finally get that catch. Hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. If it was, be sure to leave a like on the video. We appreciate that. And drop a comment below. Are you gonna go try the A-Rig next year if you haven't tried it before? And which A-Rig or setup or both are you looking at? And if you're already proficient with the A-Rig, drop lots of tips in the comments below. It'll help everybody in the community out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.